Hey, Carl Lanning here from Brazos River Charter School with This Week in History, specifically the week of January the 19th through 25th. So, let's see what we have this week. First of all, I mentioned Mr. Poe to you last week. Of course, anybody remotely familiar with the book has heard of Edgar Allen Poe, The Raven, The Pit and the Pendulum, Murders on the Rue Morgue. He's considered one of our greatest poets and writers, and it's true. Well, what is lesser known is that he did have another career for a while. He was in the United States Army. He actually wasn't a bad soldier. He lied about his age, lied about his name, and joined the Army, the artillery specifically, and within a relatively short period of time, actually reached the rank of Sergeant Major, which this is the highest enlisted rank at the time. It's amazing that he made that. Because of this, he was able to get an appointment to West Point. During the time that he was at West Point, he finished at or near the top of his class in mathematics and in foreign languages. However, there were some family problems and some financial problems, and he wanted a discharge. However, the only way to get that was for his stepfather to give him permission to do so, and permission was not forthcoming. So Mr. Poe decided to take matters into his own hands. In a total of 1 month, he racked up 66 offenses. During his one and only semester, he was court-martialed and found guilty on 2 counts and summarily discharged. Now, this account does not specifically show up anywhere in the West Point records, but the legend is that one of his offenses was at morning assembly he showed up wearing nothing but a belt and a smile. I hope that's true. God, I hope that's true. It would fit. Winston Churchill. January 24th, 1965, Mr. Winston Churchill died at the age of 90. I must admit I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill, great admirer. The way the photographer, by the way, was able to get that look on Churchill's face is he had a cigar in his mouth. He got the camera ready, reached up and jerked the cigar out, and the minute he pulled the cigar out, that was the photograph that he got. Churchill is regarded as one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century, maybe the greatest prime minister that the UK ever had. As I said, he died at the age of 90 on January 24th of 1965, and his funeral was of absolutely epic proportions, befitting who he was. The leaders of around 100 nations attended his funeral. His coffin lay in state at Westminster. Later, it was loaded onto a boat and moved down the Thames River. And I thought one of the greatest tributes, and they did this all on their own. This was not anybody telling them to, but the crane operators that would unload boats as Winston went by, they bowed the heads of the cranes and then later raised them back up. I thought that was an interesting tribute. Churchill was a character. He was somebody that could be witty, clever, ingenious, difficult, prone to flights and fancy, and a real pain in the rear in a shockingly short period of time. All of those things put together. But some of his verbal spats were absolutely classics. This is Lady Astor. Lady Astor was the second female member of Parliament, and apparently Churchill didn't have a problem with women serving in Parliament. He just didn't really like Lady Astor. They got into it on the floor of Parliament, and her comment was, "Mr. Churchill, if you were my husband, I would poison your drink." To which Churchill replied, "Madam, if you were my wife, I would drink it." They really didn't like each other. And then you have, actually, even with friends, this is George Bernard Shaw, the playwright. He and Churchill were fantastic friends. Shaw sent 2 tickets along with a note, and it said, "Winston, 2 tickets to opening night of my new play. Bring a friend, if you have one." Churchill sent a note back, "Impossible to make opening night. Will come second, if there is one." And this was a friend of his. I don't know, I love the man's wit. Think about it, if you think about the time, he was born in 1874, died in 1965, 90 years. the amount of change in that period of time. You know, the world really hadn't changed a whole lot up to about 1800. I mean, in 1800 and 1400, the fastest way to travel was still a horse or a sailing ship. But the world was really starting at this time to change. When he was born in 1874, the fastest way to travel was by steam train. All cooking, heat, and light was done by open flame. This is a man who lived long enough to see the electrification of the world, the automobile. The germ theory of medicine was unknown when he was born, but he lived long enough to see transplants. He was 29 years old when the Wright brothers first flew. He lived long enough to see men go into space. He was actually part of the last good old-fashioned gentlemen draw your sabers cavalry charge that the British Army ever did. But he was the Prime Minister of Britain when they achieved the atomic bomb. It's a chunk of time. And I would ask you just to think about the changes that have occurred in your lifetime. If you're anywhere over the age of, 15, the fact that you're seeing me right now would be one of them. It's amazing to think what will happen in the next 90 years. Anyway, well, that's it for this week. Just to give you an idea of what's coming. We will find out next week why, if a young man showed up at your house to pick up your daughter driving one of these, you would have grabbed the shotgun and told him to keep on moving. I'm Carl Lanning, Brazos River Charter School, and we look forward to seeing you right here next week.